Hi, I'm Tim from Metalform Tow and Farm. Today I'm going to show you how to remove the wheel on your Tow and Collect 1500 Pro. You may need to do this in case of a puncture. The things required for this job is one piece of timber approximately 3 inches thick, another piece of timber used as a lever approximately 4 inches by 2 inches, some grease, a 24mm socket, a flat bladed screwdriver and a small hammer. The first step in removing the wheel, we need to remove the dust cap that is protecting the nut. To do this, we're required to have either a cold chisel or a flat bladed screwdriver and a hammer. To remove the cap, we need to open up the gap between the wheel and the dust cap by tapping the screwdriver and prying it open with the hammer. Once you have opened up a small gap between the dust cap and the wheel, you can pry it open using your flat bladed screwdriver. By placing in between the cap and the wheel and twisting it, again going around in a circular fashion, you will be able to release the cap. We can now access the nut.
Okay, removing the wheel nut, take one.
Once the dust cap is removed, we now need to loosen off the wheel nut. For this job you'll require a 24mm socket, loosen the nut so it's protruding the end of the stud and leave it there. To remove the wheel, we first must take the weight off the wheel so it can slide off the axle easily. First step is to lift the Tow and Collect to the highest position. Second step, by using a piece of timber that is approximately 3 inches thick, sliding it under the body of the Tow and Collect. Lowering the machine down onto that piece of timber will allow that wheel to spin freely. To finally remove the wheel from the machine, we will need a small hammer and a piece of wood as a lever. It is important to note at this stage that the nut that we partially removed before must remain on the axle stud and protruding past the thread approximately 2 to 3 millimeters. This is to ensure that when we tap it with the hammer, as I'll show you, it does not damage the thread. Particularly on old machines, the wheels can become stuck on the axles. I'm going to show you a tap and lever technique to release the wheel bearings off the axle. Firstly, using the timber as a lever, slide behind the wheel and the machine and put a bit of pressure pulling outwards. While holding pressure on, using the hammer, tap the nut that we loosened before. Once we have loosened the wheel using the lever technique, the next step is to remove the nut completely and by grabbing the wheel each side, pulling it off. In this step I'll show you how to replace the wheel on the Tow and Collect. Firstly, before we put the wheel on, check that the axle is clean. Once it is clean, rub on some grease around the entire axle faces. Once there's grease on there, slide on the wheel like so. Before we put the nut on, ensure that the washer goes on against the bearing face. Once the washer's on, we can then wind the nut on. putting the nut on, we need to tighten it up reasonably tight. First, with the wheel spinning, tighten it up as tight as we can. And ensure that the wheel spins freely. Prior to replacing the dust cap, it would be important to check that the valve stem is facing on the outside of the wheel. Also, ensure again the nut on the axle is done up tight. Replacing the dust cap, it's important to note not to hit on the centre of the dust cap. This will dent the cap, making it unusable. To correctly fit it, put it on the inside of the hub pressing, push the base in with the top slightly out, then using the hammer, tap along around the outside of the rim in a circular fashion. The final step is to again ensure the wheel spins freely. We then need to lower the weight of the machine back onto the wheel and remove the timber from underneath. Thanks for watching today's tech tip video on how to remove and fit the wheel on your Tow & Collect 1500 Pro. Until next time, happy collecting.